Hi, you guys. It's Miss Lester here. Happy Friday. You should be on the slide that indicates that you are ready for the lesson on Friday, June 7th, which is on literary language, punctuating quotations, and making sure that your title is correctly punctuated as well. So let's just go ahead and jump right to it. I'd love to do some more specific work within the draft that I've been working on, so I can show you exactly what I mean when I say literary language and punctuating quotations. So here is the rubric that shows you where these items are assessed. Criterion C, which is appreciation of the writer's choices. That's author's purpose. That's why Ibsen or Garcia Marquez or Camus do what they do to their characters, etc. And then, as always, E for language to make sure that all of your grammar, punctuation, usage, mechanics, all of that stuff is correct. If you take a look at this slide, what I did here is I gave you three different ways you should be using literary language and using sort of like levels of literary language. If you click on the link, it'll take you to a website that gives you a way to increase your literary language using the Oxford Dictionary. It's right here. Um, and that's a way to sort of make your own language more literary in your prose. So here are the different levels. So level one, you should make sure that you're mentioning at least one specific literary concept in each paragraph and that they synthesize with your thesis statement. So make sure that your thesis statement matches up with your body paragraphs and your topic sentences. The most common literary elements you might discuss: characterization, symbol, motif, structure and style, diction, tone, imagery, parallelism, contrast, juxtaposition. All of these things are commonly used. You don't have to use super fancy specific ones like anaphora and epistrophe and metonymy and synecdoche. Use the ones that you know how to use and use them well and often. So that's level one. Level two, make sure that you're contextualizing characters and concepts. Don't just mention character names, use the relationships and character types to create complexity and to really amp up that use of your literary language. Also, scenes as well, and sort of showing the relationships between, especially if you're talking about character change, you want to make sure that you're showing exactly how that character is changing from scene to scene to scene to scene, from the beginning to the end. And just like we worked on yesterday, make sure you're contextualizing your quotes by mentioning their scenes in the the introduction part of your ICE. I'm going to show you exactly how to do that in just a moment with my sample essay. And then finally, level three, that's using elevated voice, style, and language, using specific and descriptive language wherever possible, using synonyms for words you have to use more than 3 times, using analogies and figurative language where appropriate. That's where using that Oxford Dictionary is going to really help you out. So that's where you really turn your own writing into literary writing. So go ahead and open up your document. I'm going to jump over to mine and we're going to pay attention to one specific paragraph. In specifically the second paragraph, I've already come through and listed some things that I know that I want to address in comments, which is a really handy tool of Google Docs that lets me come back to things all at once. So I kind of like to do that. Okay, so the first thing in the first paragraph, I've made myself a note here to use synonyms for subservient housewives and and questioning independent woman, because guess what? I used those exact questioning independent woman and subservient housewife. I used those exact words in my thesis statement, so I want to switch up those words a little bit. I want to change subservient. So I want to say passive, and then housewife, maybe a spouse, passive spouse, to I'm going to change questioning independent woman to an empowered, self-possessed woman. Okay, so see how I sort of like took my own ideas. I'm going to make that bold again. Took my own ideas and sort of like just switched them up with synonyms so that way it's not sort of standing out that I'm using the literal exact same words in the exact same order. Other things that I've bolded here in this sentence, I say, while the initial threat from Krogstad, my typo. Also, let me fix marriage here. I'm going to run a Grammarly search on this, or I'm going to run this through Grammarly, but as I see it, I'm going to fix it. So, while the initial threat from Krogstad to expose Nora's financial actions establishes the conflict of the play, it is Nora's husband, Helmer, who is most responsible for Nora's emotional turmoil and evolution. To emphasize the change that I talk about in my thesis, I'm going to add that here. Establishes the conflict of the play and initiates Nora's dynamic character change. Let's see. I said here I want to add something about antagonists. So this causes the audience to question who the actual antagonist is, period. Okay. Now I'm going to unhighlight this so I don't think it's part of that quote later on. Okay. Now let's see here. In the next sentence, I say Torvald's outspoken insistence that almost everyone who has gone to the bad early in life has had a deceitful mother, and that an atmosphere of lies infects and poisons the whole life of a home, reveals his disgust for deceit, and ironically causes Nora to deceive him further because his strong opinions discourage her from revealing the truth, creating dramatic irony in the play. Okay. So then I say, thus, as a result of the antagonist, Krogstad, who brings forth the play's conflict, I've already said that up here. Who has inflamed the situation further. So I'm going to say, thus, as a result of the original action of the antagonist Krogstad and Helmer, who has inflamed the situation further, Nora becomes emotionally stressed. That's not exactly what she's also doing. She also questions her dedication to her household. She exclaims, "It's not true. It can't possibly be true." So I noticed that the problem here is I'm not sure where this quote takes place. It's not true. It can't possibly be true. I looked it up and it happens on page 28 of the Dover edition, which is the last line. This is the last line in Act 1. So I'm going to add that here. I said in the final lines of Act 1, she exclaims, and then there's the quote, and I'm going to put the citation here at the end. So then I say the repetition of the assertion that it's not true establishes Nora's belief toward the situation and indicates her emotional stress. Her disbelief toward the situation. I'm going to expand on that a little bit more because I think it needs some development. She doesn't want to believe that she is a negative moral force in her own home, but Torvald's words have made her question herself. Period. The repetition of this phrase draws a parallel to the beginning of the play, in which Nora repeats her phrases when discussing domestic issues, revealing her excitement. instead of draws a parallel to, I'm just going to make this parallels to make it a stronger verb and kind of cut down on my word count a little bit. Okay, so I've done everything I set out to do. I've really amped up the literary nature. I've added a claim as I went. So that makes this paragraph a lot stronger than it was when I started. So then I can kind of go back, resolve all these comments, and move on to the next part of the lesson, which is about punctuating quotations. Now, remember, I went over this with you yesterday. You always want to put the page number in the parenthetical citation, not that whack stuff that you guys find on Spark Notes that's like 15-1. None of that. We want the actual page number. So make sure it's page number in parentheses. Now, the way it works when you look here at the end, you have the quote surrounded by the quotation marks, then the parenthetical reference, then the period at the end. So here's how it reads. In the stage directions that open the first act, Ibsen calls the Helmer's front room, quote, a room comfortably and tastefully but not expensively furnished, end quote, parenthetical reference, period. Okay, so here are just a few more rules of thumb. If you're quoting from the main text, you don't have to put the author's name in the parentheses. The only time you need to put the author's name is if you're quoting from more than one author. Now, this isn't a research paper, so you should really only, unless you're using some literary theory that you found, you should only be using the main text. So you should only be quoting from A Doll's House, The Stranger, Chronicle of a Death Foretold. Now remember, the parenthetical reference goes outside of the quotation marks at the end of the sentence. The citation always goes at the end of the sentence, and then the period goes after the parentheses. Only a page number, again, only page numbers will be accepted. If I see 13.4, 1.5, like that's not a thing, and I'm going to mark you down for that. So make sure that you're using page numbers only. Now here's the thing. This stuff matters. It's easy to check, so check it now. Go back to all of your quotes, make sure that you're punctuating them correctly, make sure the citation's at the end of the sentence, and make sure it's a page number. This stuff matters. So pause the video, go check your stuff, come back, and then I'll lead you through the last part of the video. Pause it, go do it now. Okay, so you paused it, you did it, now you're back. The last thing I want you guys to look at is to make sure that the title is punctuated correctly and that's italicized. It should be italicized in the body of your essay. So right now, what you're going to do is a find and replace. You want to make sure that every single time that you cite the title, it's spelled correctly. No abbreviations. I know that in class and in your outlines, we talk about ADH and CDF. Like, no, you need to actually write out the full title of the work every time that you mention it. And here's exactly how it should appear. So, A Doll's House, The Stranger, Chronicle of a Death Foretold. Not Chronicles, not A Doll House. Make sure it is exactly correct. The readers who read your essays will judge you on this stuff, and it's easy to fix, so do it now. So do a find. I don't like to do a find and replace because I like to see everything that I'm changing. So A doll. So I'm going to find every time I use the word doll because that's going to show me. So occasionally it'll bring up doll and dolly, but it'll also do find the title as well. So here it is, A Doll's House, A Doll's House. Checking it, that's correct. And then doll and dolly. It's interesting that I don't mention it in my conclusion. So I'm just going to go ahead and mention the title of the text again. The other thing is it shows me how many times I used the title. So 4 mentions of doll in the essay, 2 of them were the title. That's not a ton, but you definitely want to reference it in the beginning, in the intro paragraph, and in the conclusion at the very least. Now, the other thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I spell the name of the author correctly. Henrik Ibsen, right? That's what I'm doing here. So first thing I want to do, of course, this is not going to find misspellings. I've got to do that myself. But Ibsen, I mentioned 7 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,